Lisa, what about, because a lot of times businesses have, well, we recognize our people by giving them a Starbucks card. Is that the type of recognition that most companies?
So there is no one size fits all. And it annoys the fire out of me when I worked at an electricity company in Louisiana, and this gentleman was stunningly amazing at his job and should have been a manager. So I sent a note up to the president of the company that I had a relationship with, mentioned his name. He said, "Oh my God, I wish you hadn't done that." So one size fits all for reward doesn't work. Do you want money? Do you want time off? You know, what is your currency? I want to add to that too. Trust is always a foundation of culture. If I can't trust that we're meeting the social agreements with each other, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd add there.
Absolutely. No, totally agree. So how does company get or build or develop their culture? Where does that process start? Ian, where does that process start?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to be the VP of culture management at Countrywide Financial, ironically. So for those who may not understand the context of Countrywide Financial, it was at the impetus and at the cusp of the great housing crisis. And here I was VP of culture management.
Lucky
prior,
you.
yeah, lucky me. But I was there prior to that, prior to the collapse and after. And one of the things that, as I bring that up in context of the establishment of what the culture looks like from what's written, because we all live parallel lives on paper, right? When we say what should be happening from an ethos system of our values, of our collaboration and engagement, why people are leaving, most people will shake their heads and say yes. Really, what is at the foundation at its core is how is it actually lived? How is it actually experienced? And as such, and I bring up Countrywide in this very specific case, having lived it firsthand, in that what we were living were two different identities. One was what was on paper of what was our strength, how were we engaging, how were we rewarding people? What was, how were we sticking to our values? In our case, we had monthly celebrations specifically to our values, specifically to the conversation of how were we actually impacting our customers? How were we impacting each other? Redoing and our onboarding for sales and fulfillment to make sure people felt engaged, felt like they were part of the process. We had 52 locations across the country. We had culture ambassadors. So each location had a set of ambassadors who were there to help represent the voice that has trickled down from the start and from the leadership team, because it's constantly being talked about, what's rewarded, what's paid attention to.
Right.
Now, on the flip side to that, what's the actual earmark? Why, as you think about Countrywide and predatory loans and that narrative, what's the stark contrast then in that respect? The biggest thing that I saw, and that still represents even today outside of Countrywide, is that there's a ROE, which is a return on that employee, return on enjoyment, aligning to what is supposed to happen, versus most companies are paying attention to the ROI. So as we start to see people transitioning and we see people leaving companies, it's when we start to realize and you start to pull back the covers, the veils, and understand that maybe this company isn't living to its values. Maybe they're not working at the same pace of which change, of which I want to see that aligned to my own personal values. And now I'm leaving. So that's, so it starts with the leadership and how do you integrate it into your processes and what you're doing every single day, and really flipping the focus from what we measure and what we're actually talking about to a return on that employee. When that provides a little bit more emphasis than that ROI, that's when you start to see it happen.
I'm going to write that return on employee because I'm about to add that to our leadership development. So
That is
So,
huge because, yeah, most companies measure, right, the return on their investment. How much money is this making us rather than is this building up, right, our employees and keeping them engaged?
Yeah.
Zach, you've done a lot of work with employee experience.
Yeah. There's one thing I do want to go back and double tap on is really, when Lisa mentioned, trust. If you think about employees, right, we are trusting our employer with our livelihood. right?
Mhm.
So we are doing a direct exchange of, hey, I'm going to come work for your organization, and I trust the fact that you're going to give me the financial compensation, the health and benefits, my future retirement, in exchange for the work. But that's not all that we trust them with. We trust them with our career development. We trust them with upskilling us to become, not just better employees, but better people, because we know what happens in our daily lives at work. We know it's ultimately going to come back and impact what's going to happen when we get home. And so I've been fortunate enough. I've seen two drastic cultures. One culture early in my career was very performance driven culture. And so what happened is, and it can still continues, it is all measured by the P&L. Everything regarding that culture is about the P&L. And I essentially lived it. I got what I call the achievement trap. So I got focused on my worthiness was attached to the different initiatives that I led, the ROI that I was delivering back into the business. I got focused on titles and promotions. And yes, I was delivering everything, but as an employee, as a human, I was burnt out. I struggled. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, not just at the organization, but even in my home, because I judged I was achieving so many things, but I also wasn't getting any type of recognition back from the executive leadership team around, hey, thank you. Just a thank you would have been great, or just an investment in me of progressing me within the organization. And burnout was one of the reasons why I left the organization. And we see that today, right? So many people are leaving their organizations because this performance-based culture, and I use culture in air quotes because it's not really a culture, but it's burning folks out. Now, on the flip side, Harlan, the last time you and I talked, I had joined an organization called Medallia, and incredible culture. It is very much bring yourself to work, and we want to harness your superpowers. And there, I was really able to help discover my authentic self, know who I was, how did I want to show up, not just for myself, but for the company, for the clients that we served. And ultimately, what I found in that culture was we were truly a team. It was one of the most integrated teams that I've ever been part of in my entire life. And now in my new role, we're more of a startup type organization. And so the discussion has really been around culture. And I said, I want to help create a culture for our employees by our employees. And so we've just started out by really engaging with our employees and saying, what does culture mean to you? What would you like to see out of the culture? What's been the best cultures you've worked for? And ultimately, if you could sum up what you want that culture to be at Chatter, what would it be? And the level of engagement from all of our employees, everyone's taking ownership on what does culture mean? How do we make it inclusive? How do we elevate everyone within the organization? And by allowing our employees to say, this is what we want, they're taking ownership and accountability for it.
Nice.